Most people think of ancient Egypt when discussing the beginnings of human civilization, yet few are aware that the Sumerians subtly established a culture in the fertile region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers that would endure for thousands of years. The Sumerians were more than just hard-working farmers who tended to their land. They were also outstanding inventors who, as a result of their discovery, produced the first writing system in history. For innumerable centuries, information, history, and all types of spiritual value could be documented and maintained. In addition to writing, the Sumerians were skilled at creating crowded settlements with progressively advanced systems of governance. They established some of the first real cities in history, complete with courts and legal codes and established government agencies. But the Sumerians went further, pushing the limits of workmanship, trade, architecture, and even science and technology, reaching a level that was unattainable by later civilizations. Examining the Sumerians' spiritual life in greater detail reveals a varied, polytheistic, and profoundly mysterious history. According to their mythology and folklore, each natural power was protected by its own deity. Stories concerning the origins of humanity and even the manner in which they performed their ceremonies all demonstrated a strong desire to investigate the universe and comprehend how humans fit into it, especially now that archaeologists have discovered thousands of relics and innumerable old manuscripts that have been decoded. The Sumerian culture is still alive, but it is steeped in mystery, with so many unsolved questions. We continue to wonder how they made progress so swiftly in such a short amount of time, or how they were able to build structures so resilient that they have endured for thousands of years. In today's video, we'll examine the Sumerians' incredible heritage and tales throughout thousands of years. We will look into a civilization that left behind riddles that still confound us and influence the path of human history. Everyone, buckle up as we begin today's mystery. But before we get started, if you subscribe to this video, you will have amazing luck and it will solve all the mysteries you have been wondering about. The Anunnaki gods. When we look back at Sumerian mythology, we see a universe full of strong gods who all had a direct influence on humanity's fate. Among these gods, the Anunnaki group stands out above all others. They were dubbed those who descended from heaven and played a major part in the creation stories of humanity. According to Sumerian religion, the Anunnaki were not only the highest gods but also the creatures who laid the first origins of human life. According to tradition, when the gods were growing tired of working so hard to maintain the planet in order, they chose to develop a new species to help them. That was when the goddess Ninhursag and the god Enki, also called Ea, first emerged. Together, acting as creators, they combined clay from the riverbed with a sacrificed god's blood and created humanity from that. In this story, Enki is more than simply the water deity. In addition to his wisdom, he is credited with giving humanity life, turning them from inanimate clay into living beings with the capacity for thought, labor, and devotion. But the tale doesn't stop there. Humans proved less submissive than the gods had planned as they matured and gained greater independence. These divine beings were extremely enraged by human hubris and deeds that defied the will of the gods, and the outcome was a string of catastrophes, most notably the Great Flood, which destroyed everything. However, in several mythologies, Enki subtly shields humanity from the other gods' anger, demonstrating both kindness and a belief that people can overcome anything. Today's numerous contemporary explanations proposed to explain these ancient tales contend that the Anunnaki were not gods in the conventional religious sense at all, but they might have been alien creatures, or what some now refer to as ancient astronauts. According to this belief, astronauts arrived on Earth thousands of years ago. It's possible that the development of humanity was a type of genetic intervention by highly developed entities using their technology to influence the metallurgy of our species and the craft of civilization. The Sumerians' metalworking. As civilization developed, the Sumerians soon recognized they required better weapons and tools, and if they were going to continue to be productive, protect their communities, and show strength against competing city-states, the necessity compelled them to look for and utilize the riches that nature offered, particularly gold and other rare and expensive metals. Gold was the first metal that the Sumerians collected because it was naturally found in the nearby riverbeds. In Mesopotamia, the Sumerians found tiny gold flakes mingled with river sand with little effort. They next learned how to make basic jewelry by hammering, flattening, and bending it into necklaces and earrings. With exquisitely designed pendants, These items served as both ornaments and a blatant representation of the owner's wealth and influence. However, gold was far too brittle to be used as a weapon or tool. Thus, the Sumerians had to search for a different metal that could withstand the more demanding requirements of daily life. Copper was the result of their search. However, copper ore did not naturally occur on the Mesopotamian plain. Instead, it was underground, making mining for this metal a difficult operation. Mining teams and traders had to traverse deserts and hundreds of rocky miles from their villages deep within the Zagros Mountains and Perilous Mountains only to return with bulky, blue-green copper or lumps. Once they had obtained this valuable ore, Sumerians were required to learn how to construct clay furnaces, fuel them with charcoal, and utilize basic blowpipes to elevate the temperature to 1,000,000 degrees Celsius. Only at such extreme heat would the copper ore melt and settle to the bottom of the furnace as liquid metal. The Sumerians were perhaps the first to learn about this technique by chance when they observed copper ore melting during the firing of pottery. Through trial and error, they developed stronger kilns, learned how to manage the fire, and created clay molds for casting axes, knives, and spearheads for work and combat. The Sumerians quickly discovered that pure copper was still too soft and would distort with use. Through careful study and hands-on practice, they found that combining a small amount of copper with tin created what is now known as bronze, a stronger alloy. The Sumerians used a formula that typically contained 9 parts copper to 1 part tin, which demonstrates that they had developed a thorough practical understanding of materials and weren't merely depending on luck. Bronze tools and weapons quickly spread, even though they lacked the scientific ideas we employ today. From spearheads and military daggers to farm axes, these bronze items came to represent the strength of a society. In addition to perseverance and inventiveness, ancient Sumerian metallurgy required careful cooperation between miners, craftsmen, and merchants. Because copper and tin ores were frequently contaminated, Sumerian metallurgists had to employ charcoal to enhance the metal's purity and cleanse it. Despite the fact that this procedure would readily break kilns and release hazardous smoke that was harmful to their health, keeping the fire going steadily and regulating the temperature was a true craft, as one error could destroy the entire batch, reducing weeks of labor to nothing. These priceless materials had to be transported back via lengthy, arduous treks across mountain ranges, depending on a vast trading network that connected Mesopotamia's numerous city-states. Contemporary scholars are astounded at how rapidly Sumerian metallurgical technology progressed. Within a few brief decades, it went from the use of primitive stone tools to manufacturing vast amounts of superior bronze weapons and implements. There is almost no indication of the errors or shortcomings you might anticipate. The archaeological record has no broken kilns, wrecked or fractured metals, or significant quantities of defective wares. Some academics have speculated that the Sumerians may have discovered the secrets of metallurgy from a different culture, but as of yet, no comparable method from the same era have been discovered elsewhere. How the Sumerians were able to achieve such heights is still a puzzle that archaeologists and historians are attempting to solve. There are still many unanswered questions, and it is this sense of mystery that makes the Sumerian story so intriguing, serving as a reminder that human ingenuity truly transcends all historical boundaries. The role of gods and religion for the Sumerians, a sophisticated and multifaceted religion, meant that the world was more than just subject to natural rules. They were totally dependent on the will of the gods they revered, believing that every good or poor harvest, every protracted drought, every unexpected flood, and every rainstorm were determined by the gods. Without keeping an ear out for clues from the supernatural realm, nobody could forecast the future. That belief fueled the construction of enormous ziggurat temples that rise high in the center of their towns, with each tier reaching upward to the sky, as though in a last-ditch effort to unite humanity and the holy. In these temples, priests were crucial go-betweens between humans and the gods. They were selected and schooled through a rigorous procedure to guarantee that every ritual was carried out from beginning to end with perfect accuracy, because the entire city-state's offerings could be destroyed by a single error that would enrage the gods. In addition to delicious food and exquisite wine, the altars occasionally featured uncommon creatures and, in some instances, even human lives. What's amazing is that every city-state had a distinct patron deity. Enlil, the god of wind and absolute power, served as Nipa's emblem, whereas Enki was well known because Eridu worshipped creation and intelligence. Yet these deities were unimagined. The Sumerians never viewed them as a group because they lived in isolation, much like their myths. Their myths were more than only explanations of natural happenings in their own civilization. By acknowledging that the gods might also become enraged, they assisted the Sumerians in developing a sense of kinship with their gods. Like any Sumerian citizen, they had to fight to maintain their position and endure defeat. Religious festivals and rites developed into significant gatherings for the community, instead of merely relying on chants. The most obvious instance of the monarch acting as a god was at a festival at the beginning of the year. Priests conducted prayers and sang traditional hymns while reenacting legendary wars to uphold cosmic order. The king oversaw parades through the city's streets as everyone applauded and made contributions from the season's first ripe fruits to cakes, wine, and priceless items that each family accumulates over the year. Not every ceremony was a joyous celebration. Occasionally, the Sumerians thought that only the most significant sacrifices would honor the gods. For instance, obedient people were sent to bury kings or nobles. These human sacrifices were uncommon and only made for the purpose of sending servants to the afterlife to serve their masters eternally. These occurred only during the most important events, and they demonstrated how carefully and obediently the Sumerians handled their faith. It's amazing that despite centuries of rivalry between cities, Sumerians preserve a cohesive religious system that manages hundreds of gods while maintaining a clear hierarchy between the major and minor deities. It was difficult for the priests to remember each name, role, and favored offering, as even a minor mistake like giving the incorrect gift could be interpreted as a slight to the gods. Additionally, city-states engaged in intense competition to demonstrate the superiority of their patron deities. Uruk, for example, desired that Inanna be revered atop Enlil of Nipper, igniting ongoing arguments between factions of priests. By incorporating lesser gods into the family trees of the greater ones, the Sumerians showed incredible inventiveness in resolving these disputes, creating an adaptable yet cohesive network of divine connections that preserved order and stability in their intricate worldview. If there's one thing that contemporary academics are still baffled by, it's why the Sumerians put a great deal of effort into creating a highly developed religion system that was far more advanced than anything else in their era. Perhaps in a region as erratic as Mesopotamia, where droughts and floods occur frequently despite the ongoing dangers of illness and conflict, people felt safer and more secure when they believed in the protection of strong gods. This belief also helped keep their community cohesive as everyone strived to appease the mystical powers that dominated their culture. The enigmatic handbag motif, if there is a sign that appears to go beyond spatial limitations and connects different civilizations across continents, it would undoubtedly be the enigmatic handbag theme engraved into ancient cultures. When you examine the ancient Sumerian reliefs in Mesopotamia closely, you can easily identify pictures of gods standing towering and magnificent on ancient stone platforms, always carrying a little purse with a rounded handle. With a completely rectangular body and a crescent-shaped handle, this handbag theme is very interesting. It appears not only in Sumer but also in Greek art, Egyptian temple walls, and even relics from distant ancient civilizations in Turkey and Central America. Regardless of the nation or era, the perception of that symbol remains the same. Over the years, academics have been perplexed by the allure of handbags and what they actually stand for. Some people think that the handbag is a sign of supreme authority reserved for gods, or the highest authorities in society. Other scholars concentrate on the intricate patterns engraved on the bag's body, implying that it symbolizes sacred information or cosmic secrets that were only permitted to be held by the gods. From a more pragmatic perspective, others believe that the purse was a food or seed container, signifying the gifts that the gods gave humanity to support life and nurture them. Although the theme is not exclusive to religion, the purse also serves as a protecting object in ceremonies, a container for holy items or talismans to fend off evil spirits. The range of ways the purse is depicted in artwork demonstrates that this symbol's meaning extended well beyond a single ancient society. When artisans carved these purses onto their reliefs, it's possible that they were subconsciously conveying a desire to link people to the divine or desire to preserve knowledge and transmit it to coming generations. The Sumerians' disappearance, when we reflect on the more than 3,000 years of glorious history, the Sumerians' enigmatic disappearance from Mesopotamian history leaves us with a tale that is both wonderful and full of serious questions regarding the vulnerability of all civilizations on this planet. Composed of autonomous city-states, each with its own imposing temples and a unique political structure that they created, centuries of written history were ushered in by the use of cuneiform writing to document information and significant transactions. The Sumerians were skilled in using river water for farming, creating reliable irrigation systems, and their civilization arose from the development of crafts and trade that brought prosperity to their land under the direction of their kings. They gained adjacent peoples' esteem and adoration as one success after another. Yet, as any society reaches its peak, the seeds of fall can stealthily sprout, frequently without anybody noticing at first. Overuse of natural resources in the 2nd millennium BC rendered once fertile terrain desolate. The environment altered, water sources became contaminated, and agriculture saw crop failure after crop failure. The fields grew bare, canals dried up, and successive droughts ensued, depriving the populace of the safety and stability that their forebears had enjoyed. At the same time, the Sumerian city-states were becoming more and more divided. They engaged in ceaseless conflicts over territory, water, and economic benefits, breaking the togetherness that previously bound them together. The Sumerians were exposed to external powers because of their unending rivalry, and it was at this time that nearby civilizations like Assyria and Akkad, Babylon started to emerge. In addition to their conquest to increase their territories, the Sumerians also had to deal with numerous plagues. Every flood or disease outbreak added to the social unrest caused by natural disasters, making day-to-day living increasingly precarious and ambiguous, all of which contributed to a protracted, gradual deterioration. It lasted for many generations until, possibly, that once glorious society vanished from the annals of history. This serves as a warning to all civilizations that if we don't strike a balance between development and protecting the environment, between peace and rivalry, and no matter how successful we are, we will always face the harsh and eternal cycles of time and history. The enigma of Sumerian astronomy, if there was one thing that really distinguished the Sumerians from so many other ancient societies, it was their wisdom. Since their earliest times, the Sumerians have had a distinct perspective on the cosmos and humanity's place in it. They created a worldview in which the gods not only had a rich and vibrant cosmology, but also controlled all natural occurrences and established the fundamental rules that they thought controlled the world and the heavens. The Sumerians thought the god Anu, who sat high above the sky, oversaw all of the cosmos. Enlil, who ruled the earth and the air underneath Anu, brought advantageous weather for the crops. Together with them, the goddess Inanna held the fate of the entire society in her hands, representing beauty, love, and the ferocious might of battle. But their ideas extended beyond worship and the construction of magnificent shrines dedicated to the gods. The Sumerians produced complex and poetic tales that they used to elucidate the world's beginnings, such as the Enuma Elfish and the tale of Inanna's journey into the underworld. These not only demonstrate their limitless creativity but also their profound thoughts on death and life, as well as the universe's never-ending cycle of order and chaos. All of these legends hold a layer of significance that scholars are still attempting to decipher today. The Sumerians believed that the gods were not far away, distant beings. They were present during every planting season, every downpour, and every shift in the weather. They held that all of the rules of nature, from the sun's rising and setting to the infinite roots of the stars, were formed by divine hands. This belief inspired them to construct astronomical observation apparatus. Observing the sky wasn't just an act of faith, but it was essential in keeping track of time, organizing crops, and performing significant ceremonies in society. Despite the fact that many aspects of Sumerian astronomy are still unknown today, no one can dispute the significant legacy they left behind, one in which the gods and humans and the universe's order are inextricably linked in people's minds. The mystery of Sumerian seals. When we reflect on the enigma of Sumerian seals, art, religion, and odd symbols, one cannot avoid being struck by the tiny metal or stone seals seen in surviving Sumerian artifacts that have evolved into a unique link between the Sumerians' distant past and present. These seals were not only useful administrative instruments, but they were also essential to religious ceremonies. Each engraved image, with its delicate motif and meticulous line etched onto it, had the weight of a supplication conveyed to the gods. The Sumerians left behind more than myths and tales of gods ruling the cosmos on their little surfaces. The seals contained embedded symbols and pictures whose significance is yet unclear to present knowledge, which is what makes Sumerian seals so intriguing and mysterious. The sheer quantity of symbols that continue to provoke discussion among historians and scholars is impressive. Many seals have little dots, spiral forms, or other items with forms completely different from those of the ancient Sumerian symbols that we are familiar with. Some daring scholars will occasionally even locate pictures that appear to be planets or floating objects in the sky. Some have even connected these to unidentified flying objects or UFOs that have been discussed recently. While such hypotheses remain contentious, there is no denying that the frequent occurrence of these mysterious symbols heightens the atmosphere of mystery and piques our curiosity about what the Sumerian people knew about the universe in antiquity. Archaeologists are still diligently working to comprehend each little inscription and odd image that has been placed on these old seals in an attempt to reveal the mysteries at the core of Sumerian culture. But the further they dig, the more they understand that the Sumerian seals are like magical parts of an enormous historical puzzle in which much of the true meaning is still just out of grasp. Every symbol may represent a whole narrative about the ancient world. The ziggurat of Ur. When discussing the wonders of the ancient world, the huge ziggurat of Ur comes to mind. It is one particular emblem that has evoked wonder and contemplation across generations, demonstrating the Sumerians' extraordinary talent. This enormous tiered building was constructed by the Sumerians thousands of years ago in the center of Ur, which was formerly the biggest city in Mesopotamia. This colossal pyramid in the heart of Mesopotamia wasn't constructed by a single king. Construction got underway under King Ur of the third dynasty of Ur and was eventually finished by King Shulgi, his son. This alone demonstrates that it was a massive undertaking that will take many years and require a great deal of work in addition to the foresight of Sumerian rulers. The ziggurat's whole construction was planned with layers enclosing an inner core composed of mud bricks and an outer layer of kiln-fired bricks, which have shown themselves to be exceptionally resilient. Therefore, its impact on this country has endured for so many centuries. Many archaeologists think that this building technique not only made the edifice more resilient to the extreme heat, but also transformed the ziggurat into a potent representation of both the authority and trust of the Sumerians. For the Sumerians, the ziggurat was more than merely a magnificent structure. It served as the center of all significant activities and the beating heart of the city. It served as Ur's administrative and religious hub and a house of worship for Nana, the moon goddess, Ur's patron deity. The Sumerians constructed a little temple at the summit of the ziggurat that was only devoted to the person who illuminated the night sky. The region around the ziggurat comprised dwelling quarters and grain storage facilities, and only those selected may serve there. Priest apartments and other auxiliary buildings demonstrate how essential the ziggurat was to many facets of Sumerian life, both material and spiritual. Some academics have even indicated that the ziggurat might have functioned as an observatory for astronomy or as a small version of the cosmic mountain in the Sumerian imagination, a location where heaven and earth converge. Even after years of work by scientists to preserve and investigate the site, the ziggurat of Ur's actual purpose remains unknown. Only the lower strata have endured undamaged, while the upper levels have long since vanished due to time and catastrophic environmental catastrophe. But the ziggurat's allure and mystique endure. It encourages history buffs to learn more about this fascinating but mysterious period of ancient Sumerian history. The Sumerian King List. If you wish to comprehend how the Sumerians lived, read the Sumerian King List. One document that will undoubtedly get you to stop and consider how power and authority are perceived is the Sumerian King List. These lists are more than simply plain documents. They're enigmatic chronicles that highlight the boundaries between myth and reality, which were constantly entangled. The most well-known original copy of this list was found in Nippur, a significant Sumerian religious center. However, different variations have appeared elsewhere, the most well-known of which is now located at the Ashmolean Museum at Oxford. The list documents the names and reigns of monarchs from the pre-dynastic period, even before the Great Flood, until the 14th century BC. The majority of them are dynasties that are said to have existed for tens of thousands of years, with numbers so astounding that anyone who reads them must question whether they are merely mythical creations of the past or if they accurately depict historical events. The first Sumerian monarchs, such as Alulim or Alanda, are said to have ruled for unfathomably lengthy stretches of time, yet later names like Gilgamesh have actually had their mark on history. Because of this blending of myth and fact, scholars have always been fascinated by the King List. People still argue today about which historical events are authentic and which are symbolic messages the Sumerians wanted to be sent in the future. According to some academics, the king list was utilized to validate and bolster the ruling class's power. Others believe that such massive figures were intended to symbolize immortality and eternity, a mirror of humanity's desire to enter the world of the gods. Another intriguing aspect is that, if you pay great attention, you'll see remarkable similarities between biblical tales, particularly those pertaining to the Great Flood and the Sumerian king list. The monarchs enjoyed incredibly long lives prior to the Great Flood, but after it, everything returned to a familiar order with human lifespans. The role of ladies and queens was significantly diminished. The role of women and Queen Kubaba. When people think of ancient societies, women are frequently depicted as silently standing in the background. However, if you take the time to carefully examine Sumerian history and think on the place of women in this country, you'll discover a rather distinct image from that of many other societies during that era. Women in Sumer were not only employed. They might own property, run their own company, and even file for divorce if circumstances didn't work out as they had planned. Even while these rights were contingent on social standing in the time period, this still set Sumer apart. It was a society with rules that plainly gave mothers, wives, and female merchants a voice. The laws described their rights and safeguards, which were not offered by the majority of other significant cultures during the time. But women's roles for Sumerian women extended beyond economic involvement and personal liberty. They could become influential figures in religion and culture. Enheduanna is a notable example. She was also the high priestess of Akkad and the daughter of Sargon. She will go down in history as the first person to write poetry. Her writings devoted to the goddess Inanna were more than just religious works. They were reflections of her ideas, aspirations, and faith as a woman. She became an inspiration to Sumerian women who claimed their position in ancient society using knowledge and religion. But to fully understand the breadth of women's responsibilities, you must be aware of Queen Kubaba. Her name may seem strange, but it serves as evidence of innovation in the notion that aptitude and willpower might be more important than one's birth or bloodline. The only woman in the Sumerian king list is Kubaba, who was not the daughter of any king. According to records, she gradually ascended to become the king of Kish by her own powers in 2500 BC. She did not just rule briefly, but established a century-long dynasty, leaving a lasting impression on Sumerian history as a representation of women's strength in a time when males dominated almost all positions of authority. Notwithstanding notable individuals like Enheduanna or Kubaba, the day-to-day lives of the majority of Sumerian women, particularly those from lower social groups, continue to be a mystery to contemporary academics because the majority of surviving records represent the opinions of the privileged or those in unique roles in society. The fabled city of Aratta, a name that is both familiar and enigmatic, can be found in the ancient Sumerian epic tales. Aratta. It was a metropolis that was formerly referred to as Uruk's fiercest enemy and a place that has inspired interest for millennia. Aratta appears as a city in the Lugal Banda legends and the Epic of Enmakar, so it is so rich that even Uruk's great rulers were wary of it. It is a site where fine crafts and jewels can be found, and it was reportedly far higher than the norm at the period. According to ancient accounts, Aratta is a fertile region where rare metals were mined and the most talented hands produced exquisite artwork and glittering stones that could make any nearby civilization watch with admiration. Despite the fact that the epics left the image of Aratta in people's imaginations, the precise location of this city remains a significant mystery that historians and archaeologists have yet to completely resolve. Some people think that Aratta existed in the Iranian plateau, which is home to high mountains and underground mineral mines. Others speculate that the city may have been in the Indus Valley, Armenia, or the Caucasus, even farther away. Each idea gives historians a fresh perspective on how ancient civilizations previously flourished, yet to date, none of the clear proof of Aratta's actual location on the Old World map has been found through searches. Since no tangible evidence has ever been discovered, some academics speculate that Aratta may simply be a mythical city built by the Sumerians. Perhaps for the Sumerians, Aratta was never a physical location but rather a representation of an unending hope for advancement, prosperity, and limitless inventiveness. Aratta's legacy, whether it was a myth or a reality, continues to inspire people who enjoy discovery, and each time that name is brought up, we are reminded that some historical mysteries remain waiting for us to continue exploring. The Sumerians' love for beer. If you ever had the opportunity to go back in time to ancient Sumer, you would soon discover that beer was more than just a basic beverage. It was a vital component of the culture and the spiritual life of the locals. On carefully carved antique seals, you may view pictures of individuals gathered around big jars sipping beer using long straws, which is unmistakable proof of a custom that was deeply ingrained in Sumerian culture for thousands of years. During family gatherings and festivals, beer was always a staple at events, serving as a unifying factor and a link between each person and the greater community. The Sumerians not only invented the method of making beer, but they also valued this craft so highly that they even had a unique goddess for it, Ninkasi, who was revered as the mother of brewing. A music hymn was written and passed down from one generation to the next that not only explains how beer is made, but also reminds everyone of the profound significance and holiness of this beverage. The Sumerian recipe was genuinely exceptional, as they utilized barley to produce a viscous, rich beer that required straws to drink. But the worth of Sumerian beer penetrated every aspect of spirituality and transcended taste. For the Sumerians, drinking beer was a means of sharing joy and relieving weariness after a long day of perseverance, and to provide an opportunity for everyone to feel more connected as a community. Beer was regarded as a gift from the gods, a sign of joy, and more than merely a means to slake thirst or boost nourishment. Beer drinking was a ritual that endured for thousands of years, providing a profound sense of contentment that everyone desired and leaving a lasting impression on Sumerian culture. And if there is anything that, when discussed by contemporary historians, leaves them feeling both amazed and profoundly impressed, it is this. Sumerian innovations. One of the Sumerian civilization's most significant contributions to humanity is the wealth of knowledge they left behind. The base 60 counting system they developed served as the basis for the 1-hour time measurement we use today, split into 60 seconds and 60 minutes, with the circle split into 360 degrees. Whether you are reading a map or observing a clock, Sumer's imprint is subtly visible in each number and aspect of contemporary life. The Sumerians did not merely create measurement units, such as 12 inches in a foot. They also laid the foundation for a variety of measurement methods used by major civilizations like Babylon in the future. They would carry on inheriting and growing as a result of these rational processes. Their construction, crop planning, and even social organization improved in accuracy and efficiency, benefiting Sumerian civilization and helping it grow consistently throughout many centuries. But if you examine the Sumerians' communication style, you'll see how impressive it was. The Sumerian language is one of the world's oldest written languages, and it remains so today. They created writing, which began as simple marks on clay and gradually evolved into a system of over 700 intricate symbols. It hasn't been demonstrated to have any connection to any significant language group. The Sumerians' accomplishments in agriculture and irrigation were more notable than their proficiency in language or mathematics, and they gained international acclaim as well. In Mesopotamia's arid region, they constructed intricate canals, networks that link settlements and fields while managing the water from 2 huge rivers to sustain a sizable and stable population over many generations. That system served as more than just a farming tool, but unmistakable evidence of a technical and organizational level well beyond their time, a basis that aided Sumerian society to develop into a vast trading network and one of the first hubs of human growth. If you ever believed that a great civilization needed to be established on a place that was rich in resources, the story of the Sumerians will alter your perspective. The sun-drenched region of Mesopotamia lacked nearly everything, including valuable metals, stone, and timber. Yet, the Sumerians were able to establish such a large trade network whose audacity and intelligence, without the need for forests to obtain wood, continue to astound historians today. With no copper or tin mines beneath their feet and no quarries to construct temples, the Sumerians decided to open their doors in all directions in an attempt to find what they required by making perilous overland and by sea journeys. The Sumerians reached Dilmun, a wealthy region that is now Bahrain, as part of their attempts to broaden their trading network. Bahrain was a significant location for the biggest copper shipments in antiquity and a gathering spot for traders from all over the world. They traveled to Oman in pursuit of rare minerals and then traversed deserts to trade commodities across the Middle East. With its magnificent cities and undiscovered riches, the Indus Valley was once the center of the Harappan civilization. Instead of stopping there, Sumerian caravans continued northwestward toward Anatolia, which would eventually become Turkey. They were willing to cross the Mediterranean Sea to find cedar wood, a valuable substance that is utilized for the beams of the most opulent palaces and revered temples in Sumer. The Sumerians also fantasized of traveling to Egypt and Ethiopia to sell for gold, ivory, and spices, according to archives. Each time archaeologists discover evidence of an old trade route, an odd jar, or gemstone that appears far from home, people are once again astounded by the size of the Sumerians' trading network. However, there are still a lot of unanswered questions on how they were able to plan such extensive trading expeditions. The Code of Your Name, the Sumerians recognized that one of the first legal systems to ensure that everyone could abide by the same rules and that justice could be administered equally to everyone. They needed a clear set of laws. A significant turning point was reached when the Code of Your Name appeared approximately 2100 BC. It was a new chapter in human legal history, when the first rules were meticulously documented on clay tablets in cuneiform script and made public by the monarch, who declared that Anu and Enlil, the supreme gods, had given the responsibility of upholding justice and order in the world. This code was more than just a list of rules that also demonstrated the Sumerian people's pragmatic and compassionate view on society. They paid close attention to safeguarding society's most vulnerable citizens and handled difficult civil cases to assist the populace. The Sumerians realized early on that in order to maintain social justice, society needed to become more stable and sustainable. Society had to be divided into various groups and given distinct regulations for every position in their legal system, including the king and nobility at the top, free people in the middle, and slaves at the bottom. Penalties and compensation were established differently for every group, ensuring that everyone was aware of their rights and obligations based on their position in the hierarchy. Even in commercial affairs, the Sumerians established precise figures, such as 1/5 for money or 1/3 for grain, demonstrating that they were already aware of how the law protects equity in business. It was extremely difficult to establish a written legal system during a time when the majority of people were illiterate. In addition to creating cuneiform writing to document all of the rules, the Sumerians also had to instruct a number of scribes in reading and writing who ensured that the laws would be upheld for a long time and not altered at the whim of a few strong people. The laws were written on clay tablets and displayed in crowded public areas, such as cities or temples. In practice, some people were unable to read and comprehend these laws on their own, which is why priests and judges were particularly crucial. They were the ones who safeguarded the public by explaining the laws to them, ensuring the impartiality of the regulations and ensuring that no one could misuse their authority or distort the law's original intent. It can be claimed that the ongoing competition between city-states and the strain of an expanding farming-based economy strongly motivated the Sumerians to establish open and uniform methods for resolving conflicts. Because the Sumerians considered laws to be divine mandates given to the king, religion further reinforced the role of law, establishing the sanctity of every item and assisting in the long-term stability of society. Without requiring the harsh penalties employed by several subsequent societies, the most significant contribution made by the Code of Your Name has an enduring impact and serves as the basis for later, well-known codes, including the Hammurabi Code, the Ishnuna Code, and other Jewish legal regulations. Researchers continue to be astounded by how the Sumerians established such a rigorous, compassionate, and powerful legal system despite lacking sophisticated technology, specialized law schools, and sophisticated training. The Ajuba school system. The Sumerians had an early schooling system and administrative network similar to those of their successor civilizations. They rapidly came to the conclusion that without a reliable method of storing data, every contract, every harvest, and every legend about the gods and all significant decisions made by the community might be readily forgotten, which is why cuneiform writing emerged approximately 3500 BC. This was a significant advancement for the Sumerians as well as for all of human history, since for the first time, individuals were able to document every idea, every financial, religious, and social interaction on clay tablets and transmit it to subsequent generations. Although writing and reading was not straightforward, there were hundreds of symbols in the system, each with a distinct meaning, and pupils had to spend years of working with patience. Ajuba schools were established near temples or palaces to address this demand. In the Ajuba, the best educators Sumerian society could produce used clay tablets instead of contemporary desks and chairs. Students sat on the floor, sharpened their reading pens, and listened while the teacher explained each sign, which they had to repeat the lessons repeatedly until they fully retained them and were able to write each character accurately in accordance with the lessons. In that rigid setting, the instructor was referred to as the father, the pupils as the sons, and the helpers as elder brothers. They were strict in their criticism and occasionally even reprimanded with a rod, because the Sumerians held that the only way to teach individuals who could remember and transmit information was through rigorous discipline. For instance, knowledge to the entire community. Pupils studied math using the base 60 system in addition to writing. They resolved challenging division and multiplication issues, such as figuring out the land's area using memorization tables, and studied geometry to aid in tax collection or the construction of the city's main buildings. This demonstrates that early on, the Sumerians realized that education was the only means of producing human beings and that it encompassed more than just literacy. It was required to govern and administer the city-state, but educational access was not for all. The majority of Ajuba's students were sons of wealthy, noble families, officials or mercantile families, whereas farmers, slaves, and the majority of women had no access to education. Only a small number of female priestesses had the chance to attend school and acquire literacy skills in order to assist in temple administration and property management. But this figure was low in relation to the entire population. This is why Ajuba grads were very appreciated and frequently worked as scribes for temples or important trade hubs, where they maintained contract documents, grain store inventory, letters, or preserved legal documents and epic tales that defined the Sumerian way of life. One particularly noteworthy aspect of the education system was that it required societal investment to establish and maintain an Ajuba. Substantial resources were needed to establish schools, train educators, and ensure that kids have adequate time and space to learn. For many years, any family with a child enrolled in school had to make sacrifices rather than working for a living from an early age, work to provide opportunities for advancement for the next generation. And educators needed to be proficient in writing, ethics, and mathematics, as well as having the patience and discipline to instruct future generations of students. Despite the fact that beginning in 3000 BC, the Sumerians overcame several obstacles to maintain the Ajuba system for thousands of years. The Ajuba system's legacy for humanity was genuinely preserved until their civilization declined and was supplanted by new civilizations. It extends well beyond the Sumerian period, since it established the framework for formal education and paved the path for the contemporary educational system and became a representation of learning and advancement for ages. However, the main query regarding why the Sumerians made such an early investment in formal education remains unanswered. Many scholars are still perplexed, as it is obvious that not all societies realize that information is essential to an entire community's prosperity and power. The Sumerians' funeral customs under Leonard Woolley's leadership, complicated funeral customs practiced by the community, were discovered. At the royal grave, there was not just a great deal of wealth, but also a strong religious conviction and a close, structured social structure, which is demonstrated by a number of intricate, expensive, and occasionally incredibly cruel burial practices. Moreover, out of over 2,000 burials discovered, just 16 were deemed royal, notable for their size and the significance of the items, particularly the indications of human sacrifice, a practice that is still debatable and enigmatic to this day. The Sumerians' perception of life and death is best illustrated by Queen Puabi's tomb. She wore a gorgeous headpiece crafted from gold, crescent-shaped earrings, and gold necklaces while lying on a wooden bed. Archaeologists discovered gold, lapis lazuli, and other valuable stones that were brought from far-off places around her. Up to 25 bodies are meticulously positioned as guards, musicians, and handmaids who are still ready to serve their queen in the hereafter. In some tombs, the funeral rites were even more ornate. A stone chamber with riches, such as golden lies and gold vases, was used to house the body of a king or queen. Exquisitely carved cups, the norm for a wooden box with shell inlay, and priceless stones depicting scenes of conflict and tranquility are regarded as a masterpiece of Sumerian art from antiquity. But the ceremonies did more than only bury treasures. They also sent servants into the courtyard connected to the burial chambers. There are open death pits where dozens or perhaps hundreds of individuals were in orderly rows, all dressed magnificently, with golden headdresses and holding musical instruments. The greatest death pit was numbered, and the instruments appeared as though they were preparing to enter a grand ceremony. Up to 74 remains from troops wearing bronze helmets were found at PG 1237. Handmaids wearing exquisite jewelry, all of whom participated in a ceremony prior to their initial departure from this life. Woolley thought that in order to join their master to the afterlife, these individuals swallowed poison. Yet contemporary CT scans have showed a harsher reality. Several people died from severe head injuries, a swift but brutal demise that demonstrated a deep belief. Funeral rites were frequently lengthy ceremonies in order to continue serving their lord beyond death. As communal gatherings, they started by preserving the body with heat and early forms of mercury-based substances, a process of mummification. Then came feasts, music, tears, and, at the end, the closing of the death pits, which signify the conclusion of one life cycle and the beginning of the eternal journey. In order to coordinate these rites, the Sumerians had to gather vast amounts of gold and lapis lazuli from India, Afghanistan, agate from the Zagros Mountains, and hundreds of active military personnel. This demonstrates that funeral customs were both religious and a declaration of the absolute sovereignty of the king or queen. But the query that most perplexes experts is why so many were prepared to embrace sacrifice in order to accompany their lord to the afterlife. Some argue that it was voluntary and regarded as a tremendous honor, because many people had always wanted to serve in the royal court. Following their master into the hereafter was a component of their belief that life goes on rather than ends. The underlying significance of these funeral rites was that they served to uphold the monarch's absolute authority. They demonstrated their supremacy in both the world of the living and the world beyond, while also demonstrating the capacity of Sumerian monarchs to control and organize people and material resources. This is evidenced by the existence of opulent artifacts, such as silver vases, turquoise jewels, golden lyres, or the norm of yore, which is evident proof of highly skilled craftsmanship, an extensive trading network that reaches as far as Afghanistan and India, and a well-structured community in which each individual understood their part and duty in each significant ceremony. During funerals, the entire town came together for meals, music, and sadness, and they watched every move as the king or queen was sent to their last rest, reinforcing social order and uniting all people in a common belief in the afterlife. The habit of human sacrifice and royal burials was not always prevalent. Following the royal era, these practices progressively vanished, most likely as a result of shifting theological views or because the expenses and resources got too high. The royal tombs that still stand as a testament to civilization are remarkable, since they not only provide a tale of prosperity while also providing us with profound understanding of the Sumerian religious system, power art, and the relationship between people and the spiritual realm. From the standard of Yorta jewelry, the artifacts discovered not only demonstrate the talent of a craftsman, but also demonstrate the Sumerian people's vision and longing for immortality, even if they had to utilize rigorous rites to validate their position and authority. Behind the cruelty and splendor, one major point that remains unanswered is why the Sumerians were ready to spend so much on these funeral customs. Using such vast resources, people are sacrificed, and rites that endure for many days only to get ready for life after death, possibly in a planet constantly in danger from floods and war. The Sumerians employed these rites to demonstrate that social order and power would endure eternally, regardless of time or circumstance. The brutality altered that. The tale of the Sumerians is so symbolic that in addition to being fascinating, it serves as a reminder that since ancient times, humans have made every effort to establish their position in the cosmos and make an impression that will never be removed by history. Sumerian medicine. In addition to the constant threat of war and floods, the locals not only had to deal with a severe natural planet, but also had to conquer a variety of ailments that continuously plagued them, ranging from persistent fevers to shattered bones. They frequently had to combat disease outbreaks that followed each significant flood. In the face of all of these risks, they found faith in the healers, known to the Sumerians as Aju. Healers not only knew how to use practical knowledge but also spiritual ceremonies that had been passed down from their ancestors. The Sumerians' attitude to medicine is shown by their clay tablets, which have persisted to this day. Hundreds of prescriptions on tablets kept in King Ashurbanipal's library at Nineveh make it abundantly evident that they explain symptoms, components, and therapeutic techniques. These documents demonstrate their proficiency in using willow bark to treat headaches and bone pain, which may be the ancient origin of contemporary aspirin. They utilize garlic to fight infection and, despite their lack of knowledge about microorganisms or pathogens as we do now, use honey as a natural antiseptic for wounds. The Sumerians also used herbal medicines and basic surgical methods, such as cutting open abscesses or placing wooden splints on fractured bones. They even took care to wash their hands before handling open wounds, a process that future generations would acknowledge as a fundamental tenet of contemporary medicine. When caring for the sick, they frequently collaborated with a shaman, a spiritual leader in addition to using their own experiences. These healers would carry out rites that would ward off evil spirits or invoke the goddess Gula for protection. In order to have sufficient therapeutic resources, the Sumerians imported rare medicinal plants in addition to gathering them from riverbanks. They imported components, such as spices from far-off regions of India or resin from the Zagros Mountains, which they ground from leaves, roots, and seeds into a powder and combined with oil or beer when making drink ointments or plasters. They made sure to note each dosage and technique on clay tablets in detail, so that future generations might learn and use them. Some of the 250 types of plants and 120 medicinal minerals listed on tablets, including well-known ones like sulfur and dill, demonstrate their expertise. Even in the absence of contemporary scientific instruments, the Sumerians' achievements went well beyond what we might anticipate from an ancient society. They discovered methods to evaluate each remedy's efficacy by observing it in real life and sharing their findings from one generation to the next. They would record the process if a plant might lower a patient's temperature in depth to instruct others who followed in this protracted process of acquiring Sumerian medical knowledge. As they became wealthier, they were also open to learning from other cultures, such as Elam or Harappa, through trade. Occasionally, even veterinary expertise was applied to human treatment. The Sumerians had the ability to differentiate between several illnesses, such as distinguishing between stomach pain brought on by an infection and a fever brought on by diet, and even mentioning the sweet taste of urine to describe the symptoms of diabetes. Becoming a healer in Sumer was not a simple task. They had to memorize hundreds of plants and spend years learning to read and write at the Ajuba schools. They had to learn minerals rituals and collaborate closely with a shaman to strike a balance between practical knowledge and religious belief. Despite the intense competition for power among the city-states, medical knowledge was widely disseminated via clay tablets, supporting the preservation of unity in ancient Mesopotamia's notion of healing. Advanced medicine was typically kept for the elite, whereas slaves and farmers primarily had to turn to herbs or just ask the gods for help. Even Hippocrates, who is frequently referred to as the founder of Western medicine, is thought to have received some of the spirit of ancient Mesopotamian medical observation and diagnostic techniques, including the application of willow bark, honey, and meticulous documentation of symptoms and dosages. Many of these customs persisted in traditional medicine for thousands of years following this. How the Sumerians accumulated such a tremendous amount of medical knowledge is still a mystery today. However, their difficult living circumstances and survival instinct may have encouraged them to continue monitoring and creating new remedies. Heavenly weaponry in Sumerian mythology. One of the most remarkable issues in the tales of heavenly weapons found on ancient clay tablets and transmitted through the generations comprise Sumerian mythology. The image of Shurur the mace appears in the epic Lugalese centuries later, representing the might of the god Ninata, who was not just a living being with the ability to defeat foes, but also a soul. In the face of intense conflict, Shurur may even change into a winged lion and provide its master strategic counsel. In combat, Shurur assisted Ninata in vanquishing the snake cur, which the Sumerians perceived as a symbol of the world's chaos and darkness, bringing safety and order back to human society. Ninata wasn't the only deity to possess such enigmatic weapons, and numerous other Sumerian deities, including the sun deity Utu, also showed up with supernatural implements. He always showed up brandishing a fiery sword, and each time Utu sliced through the mountains, it meant that dawn was approaching and the start of a new day. For the goddess Inanna, who was revered as a goddess of war across Mesopotamia. It was said that the weapons of love were growing out of her shoulders. Infinite curiosity has been aroused by descriptions of these holy weapons because they include details that seem exclusive to contemporary science fiction. Some scholars think that the Shurur narrative might be a reflection of the Sumerian cultures or of Bronze period metallurgy, when they first obtained strong copper swords that were significantly better than the outdated wooden or stone weaponry. But Shurur's capacity to utilize flight to convey messages and even to alter form reveals enigmatic aspects that cause some contemporary academics to question whether the Sumerians were simply making up stories about technology, or if they actually saw things that were too complex for their age. Numerous beliefs state that tales of magical weaponry may have originated from actual events, such as the voice of the gods when Sumerians hear thunder or watch meteors streak across the sky. There are also notions that through commerce with other cultures, like the nomadic tribes in the Zagros Mountains or the Harappa in India, the Sumerians came across new technologies that gave rise to stories about flying or divine weapons that persist today. The only objects discovered by archaeologists are sickle swords and copper axes, bronze chariots, or arrowheads. There is no tangible proof of flying or message-delivering weapons when we look back at Sumerian society. We find a very pragmatic group that documented everything from trade agreements and taxes to court decisions on clay tablets, which are then meticulously preserved in local libraries. As a result of their construction, these tales about divine weaponry was not merely a work of fiction. Their impact is widespread. Sumerian mythology has a history that extends to numerous different cultures. The Sumerians' imagination reflected their desire to master as well as their goal of dominance. It's a tale of nature protecting their people and reaching for wonders beyond their reach. The Great Flood narrative is a story that transcends time. In the extensive realm of Sumerian mythology, the legend of the Great Flood is notable for transcending time and cultural barriers and serving as the basis for numerous later myths from epic literature, including as the Epic of Ziusudra, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and others, which spread throughout the ancient Middle East. Details from Atrahasis, the story of the world being engulfed by a flood, have been preserved for future generations. The character at the center of this tale is a reflection of generations on humanity's fate in the face of heavenly power. In other cultures, Ziusudra referred to Utnapishtim or Atrahasis as an ordinary individual who was selected and given responsibility by the god Enki after the gods were enraged at humanity's errors and chose to punish the world with a devastating deluge. Enki taught Ziusudra a secret warning. As the rain came down, he learned how to construct a strong boat to save his family and all living things on earth. As the seas rose, all remnants of the previous world were washed away, and the little boat became a symbol of survival and hope triumphing over the horrific catastrophe. The tale of the Great Flood is more than just a recounting of a catastrophic event. It also profoundly examines the Sumerian faith in the gods' ability to maintain the universe's equilibrium between chaos and order. Devastating floods were both a chance to bring about order and a punishment for human disobedience. Restoring Ziusudra's image to the world while adhering to Enki's directives to safeguard life demonstrates a will to overcome adversity and a faith in the god's generosity and mercy toward humanity. The Sumerians and numerous later societies, such as Babylon, Akkad, and Assyria, would even adapt the tale of the Great Flood. The Bible would use it to emphasize moral principles and teachings on human duty and humility in the face of nature, the cosmos, and the invisible powers. The story of the Great Flood is still told today because of its enduring significance and profound force. It has captured the thoughts of individuals from many generations. Please remember to subscribe if you find the mystery of the Sumerians fascinating. Comment below about what most interests you. Together, let's continue discovering the wonders that will be revealed in the upcoming music video.